Hi, it's Stu Richards from Bredin. Thank you for joining me today on our latest Fastcast. Today, we're going to be sharing new research with you on the information sources that SMBs use as they assess your products and services. And what I want to do as people are logging in is just, for those of you who haven't joined us on a Braden Fastcast before, give you a quick overview of who we are and how we help clients in the small to mid-sized business space. You can see here the kinds of folks with whom we've worked over the years, all kinds of marketers, whether in financial services, technology, telecommunications, retail, HR services, or other. And the common thread is that everything we do is to help our clients to better understand and connect with small business owners. The way we help them understand SMBs is through research, which we can execute in a variety of ways. And we can focus on a variety of audiences. As you can see on the left, the kinds of folks that we survey can really vary, by their title or role within the organization, their location, whether it's very tightly defined within the United States, for example, or worldwide research, by industry, by company size, by other attributes. And we do consumer research as well. For example, we've had clients who wanted to understand what consumer intentions are to shop small. So we can certainly do that as a complement to your small business insight initiatives. Topically, the kind of things that we look at for clients really vary from understanding, brand perception or purchase intent or buyer segmentation, purchase path, all kinds of things like that. And the methodology we use, we're pretty agnostic. We do focus groups, in-depth interviews, and other kinds of qualitative research. A lot of what we do is quantitative, and the vast majority of that, of course, is online. And that can include, full custom research, which can, take months and reveal really deep insights, or we can do agile research if you need quick turn data to understand, what's happening in the market on a quick basis. Analytically, we're also pretty agnostic, so we can do everything from straightforward sig testing across tab tables to more sophisticated segmentation, path analysis, cluster analysis, you name it. But at the end of the day, the objectives of the research that we do is to help our clients to either make better decisions around, for example, their go-to-market strategy, the media, the messaging that they use, who they target, product strategy, helping to optimize features or functionalities, or to understand, what pricing works best, and the customer experience. So if you have a mobile app or, online kind of application, we can certainly help to optimize the experience that your prospects and customers have with that. Or, and these are often complementary, not necessarily exclusive, but we do a lot of research that's designed to generate data to support programs like a content marketing initiative, a PR campaign, social media, or even to develop collateral that your sales team can use in one-on-one meetings or at events or online or you name it. And the other thing that we do is to create outreach programs specifically in the form of content or direct mail that can, of course, be based on research that we do, or research that you've done. We can help turn that into content, or it may be more advisory. But either way, when we create content, it's designed to be specifically geared to your target audience to reflect your brand, unique selling proposition, and to help you achieve your engagement goals across the sales cycle. But that's not why you're here. The real reason you're here is to understand how it is that SMBs, again, learn about your products, conduct research on them, and make purchase decisions. So we conducted research in, September to mid-October using the September wave of our SMB Pulse. You can see the participants in the Pulse. So we stratify the sample by size. Everyone who participates is a principal at their organization, meaning owner, founder, president, CEO, managing director, partner, someone like that, at the top of the organization. We do survey 500 total. Half of them are companies with under 20 employees, who we call very small businesses or VSBs. 150 of them have 20 to 99 employees. We call them small businesses or SBs. The remaining 100 have 100 to 500 employees. We call those mid-sized businesses or MBs. And again, this is a pretty generic breakout of SMBs. Your definition of SMBs may vary quite a bit. As a matter of fact, you may define them by revenue as opposed to by headcount. But this is kind of a good approximation. It's kind of along the lines of what the SBA uses, but does provide a good representative window into the distribution of SMBs by site. And you can see we don't really present the data in total here, but if we did, it would be vastly weighted to very small businesses because out of all companies with fewer than 500 employees, they constitute essentially all of them, 98%. So it's really important to understand, if you look at total data, that the vast majority is made up of very small businesses. And we conduct the pulse on a monthly basis. It's designed, again, to be agile research. So if you ever wanted to get quick turn feedback, we turn the data around in about 4 weeks on, what's the state of mind of SMBs for, inflation or supply chain or, worker availability or whatever. The pulse is a great way to do that. Again, I mentioned in terms of who participates, they have to be a principal. There, you can see on the upper right the breakout by company size. We also ask about their revenue down in the lower left, their years in business, their business outlook, which is pretty positive. 44% of them, the plurality, expect to be up by double digits this year over last year. 6% expect to more than double. We also ask, what their location is. These are all in the US, of course, and this geographic distribution is pretty representative, as is the industry representation. So this is just using the 2-digit NAICS levels. We also ask about their population density. Are they in a city, suburb, rural area? And we also ask some demographic questions. So you can see pretty good representation by male, female, by respondent age. Millennials have become the predominant generation in the workforce. We also ask about politics, race and education. But again, what's more important here is around their behaviors on using different sources of information to assess your offerings. So we asked them about a total of 42 different sources of information. And of course, these are not mutually exclusive. So, if they use search to find out about, again, your offerings, that certainly may lead them to your website or an influencer, and on your website, it might lead them to an article or a video or an interactive tool or some other format. But we did break these out as, separate resources. And again, they're not clean. So for example, if you look at one of the sources we looked at, it's lower left, the resources section of your website. So, we just broke out websites either as product information, which is of course where they'd learn specifically about what your offerings are, or resources, meaning, articles or blog posts or tips or case studies, that are more informational advisory than product specific. They may set the context for the use of your offerings or demonstrate how, folks have benefited from the use of their offerings. So we do break those out. And the way we've set this up is to go through by each stage of the sales cycle, by each company size, according to, each of the groupings that we've put together. So looking at the, first stage of the sales cycle, which is of course, first becoming aware of your offerings. And again, keep in mind, we're surveying 500 principals of SMBs with up to 500 respondents. So this may or may not match, perfectly with your audience, meaning, if we were to conduct this research for you, looking specifically at your audience, these results might vary. But again, generally speaking, when you ask small business owners, which, again, of these online categories are they most likely to use? And this is multiple select, by the way. So, we ask them here specifically, which of these resources do you use, not which one do you use most? Search really bubbles up to the top for awareness. So it might be that they've heard about your company and they might be searching for competitors. It might be that they've heard about a category and they're looking for the participants in that. Obviously, search can be used a whole lot of different ways. It's interesting, that's the number one source of awareness. Again, in this context of online resources, for small businesses and for very small businesses, if you look at the bigger businesses, MBs, those with 100 to 500 employees, they're just a hair more likely to rely on business or general news sites. Now, we didn't define that, but the implication, of course, is that that's going to be, Forbes or Fortune or the Wall Street Journal or Barron's or Inc. or Entrepreneur, something like that. Just a hair ahead of again, search, at least on the part of MBs. One of the things you might note here, the little letters, that just indicates where there's a statistically significant difference between these segments. So the little letter A that you'll note in bold in these columns, that just indicates that the respondents in column B, which is SBs, or column C, which is MBs, they're significantly more likely to use, for example, the product section of a vendor or reseller's website as a way to learn about products in the first place than very small businesses are. And of course, the little circles, that just indicates what the top three selections are for each group. And we just call those up because, we've rank ordered these in order of, rating by the very smallest businesses. But it's interesting to see how different responses are by company size. And by the way, you don't need to screen grab or take notes or anything. I'd be more than happy to send a copy of this deck at the end of the presentation. And at the back of the deck, we've included an appendix that has these same breakouts, but by industry. And it's really interesting to see how different they are by industry group as well as by company size. There's quite a bit of variation. The next grouping that we looked at after, online resources is, of course, social media. Here, it's really interesting to see, again, at the awareness stage, the role that YouTube plays. And, really important just to keep in mind, if you're using YouTube, great, and you may be having success with it because that's really a place where SMBs are going. If you're not, certainly something to consider adding to your overall kind of media plan, especially for companies with under 100 employees. Interesting, Facebook is most used again for awareness by companies, the biggest companies, those with 100 to 500 employees. It's also interesting to see that LinkedIn is in the top three across the board, by company size. So that, again, if it's not part of your social media mix, might be something to consider for 2023. The next category that we looked at is really content formats. So these are going to exist, perhaps on the resource center of your site, or you may be syndicating content to other sites, via, for example, a Taboola. And what is interesting here is how articles pop out. That's the top format for awareness. And again, they may be driven there by search, or they may be driven there by, they're just on your site. And happen to come across an article, but it is interesting to see how important that format is, regardless of company size. Second most important, email newsletter, and then third, again overall, or certainly in the case of VSBs, is one-off or promotional emails. So we love email newsletters. We don't just do research, as you probably gathered, but we're content creators as well. And for the email newsletters we do for clients, we really see, small business owners don't just tell you in research that they're important, but you really see in the analytics that they work, especially, of course, for customers. It's a great way to keep them aware of your new offerings, or, of course, your other events and initiatives, like you're having an event, or you're having a webcast, or you're starting a new partnership or whatever. Email newsletters, despite seeming sort of old school, are really effective way to engage SMBs, or one-off promotional emails, also really effective. The other grouping that we looked at, one of the other groupings, is just kind of individuals or companies that may affect their awareness of your offerings, and these can include, of course, just their peers and colleagues, their own kind of network of influencers, your sales representative, whether it's actual sales rep or, a business banker. We've broken out, basically resellers separately. A technology consultant or MSP is how we've categorized them. But we also have, internal folks like their CFO, or external, if they have an accountant or CPA, of course, much more likely to have that if they're a bigger organization. But here it's interesting to see peers and colleagues, really important for smaller businesses, those with under 100 employees. Bloggers or influencers are most important, again, out of this category for the biggest businesses. And CFOs, not surprisingly, are going to be important, again, for the companies that have them. And then finally, what we call, for lack of a better term, other sources, which is, broadcast or out of home, direct mail, or, events and trade shows. Interesting to see that, radio, TV, broadcast media, not surprisingly, is really great for awareness, especially for very small businesses. And, if you're an NPR listener, that's probably why you hear so many advertisers for the small business audience there. But, it's on all kinds of other talk radio as well. Can be very effective. And it's interesting, by the way, to note here that small business owners are imperfect reporters of their own, media utilization or, how much they're influenced by ads. So, for example, here VSBs are saying, yeah, radio or TV is important. For MBs, not as much. But it's really interesting and useful to contrast that with the analytics that you might get from your site around, for example, the formats that they actually utilize as opposed to what they tell you in primary research, or if you're getting media, utilization from your media agency, it might be quite different from what they tell you in primary research. So really important to triangulate that to the degree that you can. And this is, hopefully useful directionally to help you think about media planning. But again, to the degree that you have other sources that are behaviorally driven as opposed to perceptual, or how they even want to present themselves or think of themselves. For example, small business owners don't necessarily want to say that they're influenced by social media, but they are. We all are. So again, important to look at other sources of data to complement this kind of research. Interesting to see, the role that direct mail plays. Of course, these are all going to be more important, broadcast and direct mail at the awareness than at the research or the purchase stages, as we'll see. But also really interesting to see how important events and trade shows are for bigger businesses, those with 20 or more employees. And that's really interesting because it is very hard to get, not just the attention of a small business owner, but them to, get up out of their seat and go actually attend a live trade show. But, if you can get them to do that, they'll tell you it's an incredibly useful way for them to, learn about offerings and to, talk with a rep and really explore its utilization. So very difficult to scale, really expensive format, but, really useful, especially for bigger SMBs. And certainly here, kind of surprisingly at the awareness stage. So the next stage of research of the sales cycle is, of course, research. Once they've learned about your offerings, one of the things that may jump out at you as you look at this is the degree to which respondents are utilizing every single one of these formats. I won't, go back and compare and contrast with the awareness stage, but media consumption across the board is much higher at the research stage than it is either at the awareness or the purchase stage. So, really important to the degree that you're shaping, your overall communication plan to SMBs. When you're focused on research-specific media, they rely on it. They use it really heavily. And you really need to be sure that it's, relevant and comprehensible, jargon-free, because, at the research stage is when they're really looking to gather information and to, make assessments. So, search again bubbles up to the top. Again, out of the online resources that we looked at, really important that all of your content is optimized for search. The product section of your site, really important, and we'll see more important as we move through the sales cycle, especially key for very small businesses. For bigger businesses, rating sites like G2, Software Advice, and others, really important for them. And also what's important for companies with 20 or more employees is the resources section of your site. Again, meaning articles, webcasts, might be all different kinds of formats, but again, they really lean on that as a way to learn about the context for the use of your offerings, as well as, how your offerings have benefited businesses like them. Social media, again, YouTube is at the top in terms of utilization at the research stage as it was at the awareness stage. Facebook, remember, was biggest at the awareness stage for MBs. Here, it's most important, relatively for the small businesses, at least in terms of overall prioritization of what they use. Instagram, pretty important for very small businesses. And you'll see again, not surprisingly, the bigger the business in many cases, the much more they utilize different resources. So, for example, the biggest businesses are much more likely than companies with under 100 employees to use Instagram, to use Pinterest, to use Snapchat, to use TikTok. Content, again, you'll probably note each of these bars is a lot longer than it was at the awareness stage. So content utilization is higher when businesses are conducting research. So, hopefully you've intrigued them at the awareness stage with your, product or service and enticed them to conduct research. And again, really important that you provide great information for them, again, whether it's around context or benefits you're offerings or specific features. Articles, really important, especially for VSBs. Video bubbles up a little bit higher than it had been previously. For the biggest businesses, research reports, really important as well for SBs. They really like that. And, we've talked a little bit about the importance of rating and review sites and research reports. And I think what those both speak to is, again, the importance to SMBs of input from their peers, which they can get, again, via a research report, via rating site. So they love the idea of getting, impartial advice from other business owners, but to the degree to which you can take advantage of that dynamic by, providing them peer feedback, whether ensuring that you're on research and review sites or, are providing research reports, that's really important. And for the biggest businesses too, case studies, you probably have them. It's a really essential tactic to help business owners understand, tell me how businesses like mine have benefited from your offerings. Ideally, both relevant to my business size and to my industry. In terms of the individuals they rely on, their peers and colleagues, again, so, friends that are other business owners or, they've gone to school with or however they've, got them in their network, really important. For small businesses, again, we define as 20 to 99 employees, your sales rep is just a little bit more important than peers are. And you can see they're either 2 or 3 for VSBs or for MBs, so a little bit more important than they were at the awareness stage. So really important that, again, your reps are equipped with product or service information and case studies and, are accessible, via chat or phone or however they want to engage. And also interesting, probably not surprising, the bigger the company, the more likely they are to rely on a technology consultant, MSP, some kind of reseller, especially important for the biggest businesses. And then finally, other sources. Here it's interesting, print publications, which might seem super old school, but really important for research among very small businesses. Events and trade shows, kind of surprisingly, because small to mid-sized businesses owners don't necessarily go to a lot of those, but they certainly would want to keep up with what's happening with their industry or what's happening with key sales and marketing tactics. So again, the degree that you can engage, again, bigger businesses in particular, those with 20 or more employees, they're very, very, very open to, information gathering when they're at a live event or a trade show. And not surprisingly, by the way, if you look at, the high influence awareness like postcards or billboards or broadcast, probably not surprising that those are more influential at the awareness than at the research stage. And then finally, at the purchase stage of the sales cycle, again, going through each of these categories, search had been the top across the board for awareness, and for research at purchase, it's your site across the board. So again, super important that your site is, easy to navigate, it's intuitive, it's easy to find out what your offerings are, how they're different from each other, who they're intended to serve, what the benefits are, what the pricing structure is, all those good things. Business owners really rely on that. Rating and review sites, again, really important that you're on those. And your resources site, especially for the resources section of your site, again, your articles, case studies, other advisory elements, or things like interactive tools or checklists or worksheets where business owners can do a self-assessment or a product configurator, or determine how much your offering is going to benefit them. Super important, especially for the biggest businesses, those with 100 to 500 employees. For social media, real drop-off is the biggest takeaway here in utilization compared to the research stage. But within that context, YouTube is still the most important, certainly for companies with fewer than 100 employees. Facebook is most important, as it was for awareness among MBs. Surprising amount of usage of Twitter by the biggest businesses, from a B2B standpoint, but there it is. And Instagram as well. So, again, your mileage may vary. So if we were, again, to conduct this kind of research for your target audience, the results may vary. But I think a big takeaway is, again, if you're not on YouTube, and this is not a paid endorsement, it's something you might want to consider for, again, your going forward media plans. In terms of content, things bump around here a little bit. Remember, articles were really important at the awareness stage, and for research here, they're less important to make a purchase decision. What's more important is video. So, that's one of the benefits of, for example, having a YouTube video plan is you can certainly take any videos you create and post them up on your site, and of course to other sites as well. And here it's interesting to interactive tools and checklists. Like those are, really practical, hands-on ways to engage SMBs and to help them understand, for example, with checklists, specifically, what do I need to do to transfer my bank account, or specifically, what do I need to do to set up a server, if it's my first one, or a worksheet, for example, what kind of retirement benefits should I offer to employees? Well, here, let us help you figure that out. Or even better, an interactive tool like a calculator that says, okay, if I move to the cloud, what are my cost savings going to be? What might my energy savings be? What are my security improvements likely to be? What are my productivity gains going to be? So really helping them understand, versus their current state, what benefits they'll get by moving to your solution, or how do they compare to their peers, for example, in inventory terms, or, whatever the important metrics are for them. So if you can make it really practical and relevant to them via those kinds of tools, that can be a really powerful way to support making a sale. And then webcasts, obviously we love those, but you'll see they're pretty important for the biggest businesses as well. Again, like events can be hard to scale, but can really pay back, especially in terms of engagement among the biggest of your prospects. In terms of the individuals they rely on to close the sale, not surprisingly, less so on their peers, more so on your vendor sales reps, especially for VSBs and MBs. For SBs, they're a little bit more reliant on their CFO or some other, executive officer internally. And of course, if they have an accountant, CPA, or for smaller business and maybe just a bookkeeper, still going to be really important for them to make an assessment, build a financial case, decide on, which solution they're going to go with. Bloggers, influencers, not surprisingly, not so important at this stage. They like, direct mail or out of home play a more important role for awareness. And then finally, other sources, again, you'll see utilization really drops off at the purchase stage, much more engagement at awareness and especially at research, but still events, really important, either first or second, again, out of this category for very small businesses. For bigger businesses, kind of surprisingly, print publications, they may flip through a copy of, whatever Forbes or Fortune or, some industry specific publication. Or, it's possible that when respondents read this, they might be thinking about the site that's associated with a print publication, but, we tried to be specific that we're talking about offline only here. And it is interesting, for MBs, they mentioned direct mail as a way to help them make a purchase decision. We're big fans of direct mail, in large part because of its targetability. But it really can play a role, even to help, not just to drive awareness, but really to help drive purchase. So what we wanted to do, to kind of wrap things up is, we had broken out each of the information sources by category, but here, just to pull them all together. So for the very smallest businesses, again, with under 20 employees, we just listed the top 5 information sources at each stage of the sales cycle. The little arrows just indicate, for example, if they point down, they drop out of the top 5, in moving from the awareness to the research stage. If there's a blue arrow, it just means where they go. So it's interesting to see here, search, second most important overall for VSBs at awareness, most important out of all the tactics we surveyed for research, and then third for purchase. So search is important for very small businesses. So again, really, really, really important that all of your content, your website experience is optimized for search. Also interesting to see the product section of your site is increasingly important. Goes from out of the top 5 to second at the research stage, and then the very most important thing at the purchase stage. So, again, really important that your site is intuitive and, provides relevant information. For small businesses, search, as is the case with very small businesses, really important, actually even a little bit more important at the awareness stage, and then drops down from first at the research stage to 5th, but it's in the top 5 across the board. And the product section of your site becomes more important, as is the case with very small businesses as you move closer to the close. For MBs, a pretty different set of top 5 priorities. Articles are the most important source of awareness, business and general news sites second, all drop out of the top 5 for the research stage. In search, search maintains its kind of steady state at 3rd, but drops out of the top 5. And then for MBs, product section of your site is most important at the purchase stage, as it is for small businesses. Video, really important. The resources section, it's interesting, the top 3 are all about your site. So, really important, again, that it's optimized for the user experience and for search. And, your sales team, number 4 here at the top, at the purchase stage, again, really important that they're well equipped. So just to wrap up, a couple takeaways, for each, some of the major finders. As I mentioned, SMBs, we all suffer from our own biases and, what we recall or how we want to present ourselves, even to an online survey. So, again, trust but verify, they may understate, for example, how influenced they are by social media or by, radio or TV. So to the degree that you can complement this kind of primary data with, third-party data or website analytics, that's just going to help you with accuracy. Search, of course, is critical across the board, regardless of stage of the sales cycle or size of business. So again, be sure all of your content is optimized for that. Email, really important, whether we're talking about an email newsletter or promotional emails, just be sure that you're maximizing your utilization of that. There is a optimal point. Maximize might not be the right word because you can certainly overdo, but if you don't, for example, have a customer newsletter, it's a good thing to do if you can do that. It can even be a great way to keep, your warmest prospects engaged. YouTube, we've harped on that a fair amount, really important. And if you don't have that as part of your media mix, good thing to consider testing into. And of course, if you develop videos for that, you can certainly reuse those on your site. Articles, we mentioned are important, especially for awareness and especially even for the biggest businesses. So, really important to use that format. And the big question is which topics are going to be most compelling for your audience. Research reports, rating sites, really important. Take advantage of the desire of SMBs to learn from their peers. We're biased as a research agency, but we certainly see research reports work well when our clients utilize them. Interactive tools and checklists, as we mentioned, really important at the sales stage, to enable business owners to do, self-assessment, self-configurations. They're powerful formats to ensure that they really get how your offering is going to benefit them. Your site is critical, whether it is the product section or the resources section. And your sales reps, of course, really essential, especially, of course, for research and purchase, not so much for awareness. And then in general, utilization, as we mentioned, is kind of a bell curve. It's the highest at the research stage. So, be sure that you're providing rich resources there and supporting SMBs' desire for information on your offerings. Utilization increases also with company size. You may have noticed, for example, that very small businesses, especially in content, but really across the board, they are heavy users of a relatively few number of formats, whereas the biggest businesses are almost equal opportunity consumers of content or social media, regardless of format or site. So, for VSBs, really important to focus on a few key tactics like articles, whereas for bigger businesses, they're again, kind of equal opportunity consumers of information. And utilization also varies, not only by company size, but by stage in the sales cycle and by industry. I didn't take you through that. It's certainly in here. But really important to understand, for your unique audience, if you're focused on bigger or smaller or revenue or geographic or, what have you, really important to understand specifically what moves them through the sales cycle, which again may map to the audience we've surveyed here, or may vary. So if we can help with that, whether it's research to support your understanding of the information, the media preferences, or even the messaging preferences or other aspects of your audience, we'd love the opportunity to do that. Likewise, if you need help with the development of content to support search, to support the resource center of your site, to support YouTube or others, that's certainly something we can help with. So please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is here, or on all the reminder emails you've gotten for this webcast. We, as I mentioned, would be happy to send you a copy of this deck. So we've got all of these same slides broken out, by industry and some totals as well. So just reach out to me again, if you'd like a copy of this. We'll be notifying you soon of the next Fastcast we have scheduled for January 26th, where we'll be talking about the importance of focusing on industries in particular. But again, really appreciate you taking the time to connect today. I hope this information was useful and interesting and provided some good food for thought. And we hope to see you on our next Fastcast. But in the meantime, happy holidays.